What's up everyone, Vu of Vu Films, and I am back with another idiotic video for you to watch. And today, I'm going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. That is Canon. And as a Sony fanboy, as some would call me, I find it very hard to even say the word Canon without throwing up all of the fried noodles I had for dinner. But what made me decide to do this video? I don't know. I think it was Saturday. We're shooting a wedding video, and one of my shooters, RJ Goodwin, as you may or may not know him, he does a bunch of awesome car videos. He asked me if Canon were to give me a 1DX Mark III, if I would keep it and use it. And after about half a second worth of thought, I told him, no, I would sell it right away. Now, why would I do that? Obviously, the Canon 1DX Mark III is an amazing camera for photography and for videography. And obviously, this camera is geared more towards, how do you call it? Those professional, high-speed type photography, which includes sports, Olympics that are coming up, football, etc., etc. And, you know, I have to give it to Canon in this department, as if they did one thing correct with this camera is that they pretty much prevented a lot of current Canon shooters from possibly switching over to the A9 II. And in the photography side, if I'm comparing the A9 II versus the 1DX Mark III, I think they're quite even. There's some things that the Canon does better, and there's something the A9 II does better. So at that point, it's really up to personal preference. Ergonomics, lenses. The one personal preference I do not think any professional should talk about is color science, as it has been proven time and time again that the whole Canon color science is better is a complete myth, because one, if you want to color match your Sony to Canon, for whatever idiotic reason that is, you could easily do it with like one or two little steps in your editing program. And two, there has been test after blind test of which colors consumers prefer. And most of the time, they don't even pick Canon. A lot of times they actually pick Sony for some reason. And that just shows you that the whole color science thing is a complete myth. Just as it is that Asian people are all good at math, that is completely untrue, because when it comes to math, I cannot do math worth crap. And the other myth, that Asian people have really small... But I'm here to talk about the video side because, hey, I'm a videographer and I am always looking to improve my gear, to hopefully improve myself here and there. But when I look at the Canon 1DX Mark III, as mouth-watering as they are, and as a Sony shooter who is stuck with, I don't know, 4K, 30p, 8-bit, a really good 8-bit though, I might add, it's always tempting when other companies such as Panasonic, Canon, and what have you come out with like these nice new shiny specs. And hey, as a Sony shooter who is heavily invested in Sony gear, I have 4 Sony bodies, 3 full frame, 1 crop, and a crap ton of lenses. Does it tempt me to switch? And just as I told my buddy RJ, I would not switch. My reasoning is just quite simple. One, I have a bunch of Sony gear. I need 4 bodies because I shoot a lot of weddings. And one 1DX Mark III is $6,500. And that's just a base price. That's not including switching out all of my glass. And, you know, to utilize the 1DX Mark III to get the better specs than the Sony, I would have to spend a crap ton more money on memory cards, that new CF Express cards, whatever the heck those are, and I would have to spend a bunch of money on SSDs, which means I would have to open up 6 more nail salons just to afford one 1DX Mark III. So with that being said, of course, everyone's like, oh, well, don't you think you should get a 1DX, or any other better camera than a Sony, because you get all these nice specs, you get 5.5K or whatever. Here's my thing, okay? When I shoot talking head stuff like this, corporate interviews, wedding vows, wedding speeches, I film in 4K. I film in 4K 24p, so I do not need the 60p when I'm filming those things. And the 4K on the Sony cameras are tack sharp, and the dynamic range is really good. And so long as I light it properly, it looks great. It looks very professional. Matter of fact, it is a 6K downsample to 4K, and I am perfectly fine with that. What I would like is that when I do slow-mo, such as 60 frames per second, that it would match the 4K quality of shooting in 24p with the Sony. Now, the only issue with the Canon is that if I want to shoot full frame 60 frames per second at a resolution anywhere above 4K or 4K and above, I lose autofocus. And the dumbest thing is, the only time I really need freaking 4K 60 is in autofocusing situations on a gimbal when I'm filming moving shots, action shots. In the case of a wedding, the bride and groom holding hands, walking together, and I'm doing the whole face tracking of them. All that stuff on gimbal, I need autofocus. Now, timeout, I do get 4K 60p in Super 35 crop on the 1DX Mark III, which is cool. But the problem is, when I am on the gimbal, I have a tendency to shoot lower, especially with the Juin Weebill S. With the underslung handle, I'm always shooting low, and I always need a monitor that comes out at least like this so I could see it from a low angle. And of course, the Canon 1DX Mark III has the same exact body as before, so it is flat like this, and you can't even film it down low. You can't, you need to have all this extra stuff. Monitor, you need an extra rig. Probably, you got to rig it up. Okay, you got to buy another, monitor outside. I'm probably gonna have to use Ronin S because it's probably too big to be mounted on any small gimbal. So that completely jacks up my workflow, and I just can't do it. And look, I really have nothing against Canon. Okay, they make great cameras. I know I make fun of Canon. I call Canon trash a lot on this channel, but I am a firm believer that does not matter what gear you have. Obviously, better gear, etc., makes things easier for you. But if you are a skilled person, if you're a skilled individual, you have the talent, you can make good content with any gear. Okay, so I don't really hate on Canon. Now, with that being said, I do have issues with what Canon did, and there's probably a legit reason for them doing this, but I think they made a huge mistake by not making the new 1DX Mark III like a mirrorless camera that uses the RF mount. Instead, they used the EF mount, which literally the day after they announced the 1DX Mark III for pre-order, that they were not producing any new EF lenses. So that's a downer. And on top of that, the RF lenses are just way better. They're expensive as crap. One RF lens could probably feed a poor third world Vietnamese family for 3 decades, but they are good lenses. So, this is just speculation, but I'm just thinking maybe they should have done something where they put an RF mount on that Canon 1DX Mark III and created some type of, RF to EF adapter Mark II that is super fast, so the lenses keep up or something, because they are really using the old mount for their next generation 1DX Mark III, and I personally think that's limiting. Especially when they want new users to invest in the RF mount, but then now they're releasing EF mount and people are wondering what they want to do. If I was a Canon shooter, I would definitely just switch to Sony. I'm just kidding. Even I don't really trust what Sony's doing at this point. I have no idea what they're doing. They are saying they can release, there's a rumor about the A7 Mark IV that is, maybe announced in February. And then the A7S III or whatever camera that doesn't exist is probably maybe going to be announced in April. Who knows? But all I'm saying is, if you're a Canon shooter, I would just wait a little bit. If you're looking for like that next high spec, non-trash EOS R specs type of video camera for yourself, I would wait for at least see what they do with the EOS R Mark II or whatever other next mirrorless camera they have that is full frame, and see what they come up with, because I would be weary pretty much investing $6,500 on a camera that's really geared more towards sports photography, high-speed photography, maybe even like wildlife photography, and just happens to have really sick video specs that are somewhat crippled here and there and limited here and there. Maybe you don't really need 5.5K. Maybe you just need a solid 4K full frame 60p that has autofocus. Maybe you should wait for that before shelling out $6,500 on a body, and then you have to buy all these additional like SSDs, memory cards, just to use it as it is intended to be used. So yeah, that is my take on the 1DX Mark III. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that that camera does, the 1DX Mark III doesn't dominate any Sony mirrorless body right now in terms of just pure video specs. It completely dominates anything that Sony has right now. But at the same time, what I have here in my hand, Sony, it is actually like perfectly enough for like the content that I produce, the commercial shoots that I produce, the social media videos that I produce. It is perfectly enough. It is perfectly usable. The file sizes are nice and small, manageable, good dynamic range. Maybe, I can't pull as much, little bits of color here and there, but so long as things are exposed correctly and I film properly, the footage ends up pretty good. So, yeah. Anyways, it's getting kind of cold here. I'm gonna just put on a sweatshirt. We'll be back in the next video. Till next time, lighten up.